baby. Happy Saturday to everybody. I hope everybody is having a great weekend and a great Saturday so far. It is good to be back. I hope you also had a great holiday weekend. I know I did. Had a great holiday and a great birthday weekend. Thank you to everybody that sent birthday shout outs to me. I so appreciate it. But my name is Don Terrell, and I want to welcome you to another awesome episode of The Color of Motion, where I like to say stories come in all shades. And I highlight people of color and diverse backgrounds in the industry of motion graphics, animation, visual effects, cartoons, and comics. And if you're like me and love that space, you're going to love this episode. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today. You know the drill. Hop on in, say hello, because this is always an engaging show, interactive show. So I appreciate everybody that's tuning in. Mr. Downtown DeMille, I appreciate you tuning in and supporting as always, my brother. But like I said, we're going to have some fun here. But just a little housekeeping before we get going here. I want to thank my sponsor for today's show, DG Graphics. They do all the graphics, animations, overlays for the show and help to make us look good. So if you're a business or a brand that's looking to level up your brand design or start a live stream show yourself, definitely reach out to them because they can help you look good as well. So thank you, DG Graphics, for always sponsoring the show. Make sure you also hop on over to the Facebook group community. It's an engaging place. It's definitely growing. Our family is growing over there. Facebook.com/groups/The Color of Motion. Come join us. We're having some engaging conversation, sharing industry news, and just having all around fun over there. So definitely don't want you to miss out. So Facebook.com/groups/The Color of Motion. Also, make sure that, you connect with me on my social channels. All over here, you can find me. Definitely want to hear from you. Let me know what you think of the show, anything that you might want me to try, any guests you may want me to try and get on. But definitely want to hear from my viewers as well. Like I said, we stream to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook group. You could also check out the show on the website, thecolorofmotion.net. We're streaming there live as well. But I do always highly suggest everybody hop on over to the YouTube channel, check out the show, check out all the great content that's going up. I'm definitely looking to make that a creative corner. There you can also check out all the past great guests that I've had on so far. So, youtube.com/Don Terrell. So, subscribe, hit the bell notification, give a thumbs up, comment on the videos because that definitely helps out the channels as well. Channel as well. So I definitely wanted to hear from you there as well. What else, man? Like I said, I missed you guys. Missed everybody. Like I said, it was a great, relaxing holiday weekend. And so, like I said, I hope you had one as well. I've been so looking forward to this episode. Like I said, my next guest has a long storied career in the industry, got so much to share, and like I said, I'm just super looking forward to sitting down talking with him and you kind of viewing in on our little conversation there, and definitely, like I said, hopping on and asking whatever questions that you may have as well. I think that before I get going, I definitely want to make sure that, hey, like I said, we're always working to get sponsors on the show, help support the show and back the show. Like I said, DG Graphics is one of the sponsors. But if you are one of those viewers that would like to support the channel and the show, it helps me to continue to bring great content to you. Hey, I love a great cup of coffee. Who doesn't? Well, there's very few people that don't love a good cup of coffee. So you can hop on over to buymeacoffee.com/Don Terrell. Donate whatever you see fit. Because like I said, every little bit helps me to continue to get and make great content out to you for sure. So with that, like I said, I think we are about ready to dive into this episode here. So, like I said, I am super looking forward to this one. So, bear with me. Like I said, my next guest has a lot of accolades. So, he has been developing, writing, and producing television and film for the last 35 years, with a special emphasis on children's television and animation. His extensive and extremely varied writing and showrunning credits include multiple episodes of such classic and well-known animated shows as Scooby-Doo, Smurfs, The Jetsons, Hanna-Barbera Productions, My Little Pony, The Moondreamers, Marvel Productions, DuckTales, Disney, Alvin and the Chipmunks, NBC, and many others. He's produced, story edited, and wrote the Fraggle Rock animated series for Jim Henson Productions, and has co-created the original live-action Dog City, and also for Jim Henson. He is probably best known for his work as both producer and head writer on Spider-Man, the animated series, the hit action-adventure animated series for Fox Television, based upon Marvel's preeminent superhero character. He worked directly with Spider-Man's creator, Stan Lee, in bringing this popular character to the TV screen. His script for The Day of the Chameleon was nominated for an Annie Award, the animation industry's highest honor. He subsequently received an Emmy nomination for his work at Warner Brothers Television Animation as story editor and writer for the successful series Static Shock, based on the DC Comics characters. His feature film writing credits include the live-action comedy Class Act, if you remember Class Act, released by Warner Brothers. Fans of Japanese anime director Hayao Miyazaki have appreciated his English language scripts for the Disney released feature films Laputa, The Castle in the Sky, and Kiki's Delivery Service. His preschool children's television show credits include the puppet series Puzzle Place for PBS, which he helped develop, and the long-running popular JJ the Jet Plane, currently airing on PBS, for which he served as developer, writer, executive story editor, and producer. Several of his stories featuring the JJ characters have been adapted into children's books. In the interactive computer software field, he has written for Disney, the Hercules Interactive Storybook, Knowledge Adventure, the X-Men Cartoon Maker, and the Spider-Man Cartoon Maker. Broderbund and LucasArts Entertainment. He also worked personally with George Lucas developing projects for the George Lucas Educational Foundation. Most recently, he's co-written episodes for the new Netflix animated series Robozuna and Legend Quest. He has also recently written 19 issues of the Cyborg comic book for DC Comics. His latest project, an animated feature for DC Warner Brothers titled Green Lantern, Beware My Power, which he co-wrote, will be released on July 26th. Please, everybody, help me welcome my very special guest and friend, Mr. John Semper Jr. All right, John. Super, super excited. Like I said,
Hey,
you
Don.
have a long career and you've done a lot.
Yeah, after listening to all this, I think I want to go lie down.
Yeah, and I was saying I might need some oxygen after all of that reading. But I am super, super excited to get you on the show. Like I was telling you earlier, I so appreciate you being a part of the Color Emotion family, coming on, sharing your journey. Like I said, even though you're still going through it, you've been in the industry for quite a while, have worked on just a plethora of projects. Like I said, a lot of them I grew up on. Like I said, Scooby-Doo, the Jetsons, just so many. And so I'm just super eager and super excited to dive into your journey.
Well, thank you for having me on. And yeah, it's been a pretty long career. Somebody once said that it's only a career in retrospect. While you're in the middle of it, it's like you're jumping from one ice floe to the other just to stay alive. But I, I've managed to jump pretty nimbly, so I'm still here. I'm still alive, and I'm very thankful.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Well, I'm curious, what was it that initially kind of, you know, got the bug bit for you when you were younger that made you want to get into this and do it? What was it?
Well, it started very young for me. I used to love to draw just as a kid. I think a lot of kids do. But they tell me that the first movie I ever saw was Song of the South, Walt Disney film. And I'm very much a child of the Walt Disney era, the classic Walt Disney era. So all the Walt Disney animated films had a profound impact on me. And probably the one that came along at exactly the right time was Sleeping Beauty.
Mm.
Sleeping Beauty, when you were a kid, was pretty overpowering. It was widescreen. I think it was the first widescreen animated film that Disney had done, and it had stereophonic sound. And so, if you saw it in a movie theater and you were a kid
Mm.
of
Yeah.
my generation, it was just practically a religious experience.
Yeah. I think kind
And I
of
was
like
always,
Star Wars is, was for a lot of kind of the contemporary ones.
yeah, very much so, very much so. The fact that a movie like that started with somebody drawing on a piece of paper, I thought was incredible. Just an amazing technological achievement. So I've always been interested in animation, specifically animation. And then through the years, I kind of got more interested in film and filmmakers and directors, and started to understand what directors did and what filmmakers did, and started to understand a little bit about screenwriting, and became a movie buff. So, by my teenage years, I was starting to be a movie buff. Always, though, with an emphasis on fantasy, sci-fi, and animation. And when I was younger, I worked in movie theaters. So I started being a ticket taker when I was age 15. Actually, I think illegally by a couple of weeks,
Yeah.
because I was 15 for a few weeks and then I turned 16 and then it was legal. But at any rate, so I mean, when they interviewed me to get into my high school, I went to a private high school, and they interviewed and they said, "What do you want to be?" And I said, "I want to be a cartoonist." And my father was furious with me. Why didn't you tell them you wanted to be a lawyer or a doctor or something? I know, well, I don't want to do those things. I want to be a cartoonist. I want to make cartoons. So it's been embedded for a very long time, and I tried working a straight job uh, before I left Boston. I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts, and I left in '79. Yeah, '79. And I tried working a straight gig for a couple of years prior to that, but it just wasn't working out. I thought, let me go pursue my dream, and I came to Los Angeles, and I never stopped. I managed to worm my way into this industry, and I'm still here. So
So, well, and that kind of goes into my next question. Was How did you get your first gig into the? Well, let me backtrack. Did you go to what school did you go to get training? I mean, or did you go to like an art school or anything? Wow, I feel.
No, no, I went to a little college. Actually, I graduated from the oldest private high school in America. It's Roxbury Latin School in West Roxbury, Massachusetts, and they didn't have any particular film program or anything, but I did a lot of film. There are actual pictures of me in high school with movie cameras and making movies with my classmates and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So I did that. Excuse me, but then when I got to college, I went to a little college called Harvard, and they did have a sort of a film department. They had a little bit of film activity going on in the basement of a building called Carpenter Center, which is where all the graphic arts and mostly pre-architectural architectural studies. So most of the people who are studying in Carpenter Center want to go on to become architects or do something serious, or at least back in those days.
Yeah.
But down in the basement, they had filmmaking equipment. They had one really sophisticated sound 16 millimeter camera, which was a big deal. They also had an Oxbury stand. Now, back in the day, back in the pre-digital day, the Oxbury stand was the only way that you could shoot animation.
Mm.
And there were only two on the East Coast. And one was in a business owned by a guy named Ed Joyce, who did all of the early Ken Burns documentaries, all the
Yeah.
panning.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
and the other Oxbury was in the basement of Carpenter Center at Harvard. So that interested me greatly, just being near this piece of it filled a room. It was a
Yeah.
gigantic piece of equipment, and I was very excited to be so close to something like that. But Harvard really didn't have a film program to speak of. It had a lot of people who talked a lot and philosophized about film, none of whom had ever made a film
Yeah. Yeah.
back in those days. But so I dabbled a lot, but I didn't formally study film really.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm curious then. With I guess kind of no formal training in say film and animation, how did you kind of convince the your first employer in animation that this was I was good at it, this was something I could do? I mean, how did you kind of get into that position?
A wonderful convergence of circumstances. First of all, I came out here. I mean, I came out here with a suitcase, and my sister was going to USC. I lived in her dorm room uh, for about 3 months. I slept on the floor of her dorm room. So thank you, Terry, for that. That's to my sister.
Thank you.
But the thing is that when I was in Boston, I got involved in as much film-related activity as possible. So I worked in a very famous revival movie theater called the Orson Welles Cinema, and I did in fact meet Orson Welles.
Oh wow.
And I got involved in as much activity as I could, and I made a lot of little Super 8 films. So I was pretty well versed in filmmaking and had watched a lot of movies prior to even coming to Los Angeles. Before I left Boston, a good friend of mine, Henry Kaiser III, who was a classmate of mine, he had a friend who was about to produce a TV series at WGBH called The Japanese Film. We were big fans of Japanese film. This is back in the days when if you went to a person and said, do you like Japanese film? They'd say, what, you mean Godzilla?
Yeah.
And that was it. That was the end of it. They had no knowledge of Miyazaki or
Yeah.
Kurosawa or any of those people. So we were doing a series for people. He was going to do a series. This producer, Sheldon Renan, was going to do a series for WGBH for national distribution called The Japanese Film. I ended up being an assistant on that show. And I did a bunch of things, and they sent me to Washington to get stock footage and everything. When I decided to make the trip out to Los Angeles, I actually went to Northern California first, where I stayed with Henry. And I drove out with a woman named Adi Bach, who was Akira Kurosawa's translator. And I stayed in Northern California for about a month when Sheldon, who had now moved from the East Coast to the West Coast and was about to launch a project. This is very complicated, but I'm going to give you the full story.
Oh, go ahead.
Sheldon was about to launch a project for an investment counseling firm that was going to look into the animation business. When he found out that I had driven to Northern California, he said, well, come on down to Southern California and work for me. So this connection in Boston, the Japanese film, led to me working for the same producer in Southern California. That was what brought me actually to Southern California. So for the first 3 months that I lived here, I worked for Sheldon on this project for this investment counseling firm where one of their clients wanted to buy an animation company. I swear this will lead to my occupation sooner or later. So I came here and literally within 2 days of arriving in LA, we were interviewing all the heads of all the animation companies at that time. So I was meeting Chuck Jones, famous for the Roadrunner cartoon.
Yeah, love Chuck Jones. Yeah.
Yeah. I was on the Disney lot where we were meeting the people at Disney because Sheldon represented someone who wanted to pump a lot of money into animation. And so we met everyone. So literally within the first 2 or 3 weeks of my living in LA, I met the heads of all the major animation studios.
Wow.
Then when that job was done, I went back to some of them. And I first went to Lou Scheimer at Filmation. Filmation was a very big company. They did He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
Yeah.
And I had a nice rapport with Lou when we were interviewing him. So I went back and I said, hey, I want to work for you. And Lou very nicely tried to find me a spot at Filmation. But he first thought that I should train as a storyboard artist. And because I'd done some art and I did know how to draw. I did know how to draw. So I did a little bit of training, but he had me training under a guy who was literally a Michelangelo of storyboard artists. He was a guy named Bob Klein, and a brilliant artist. And I very quickly realized I was not up to that level, and I was never going to get to that level. And then the other thing about the animation business back then was if you wanted to be in control of the story, you had to be a writer. That was the only way, because the artists at that time did not have any control over the story. And I really wanted to tell stories. So I did that for a little while. I trained as a storyboard artist for a minute. But then I thought, I'm going to go back to another head of one of these companies and I'm going to ask for something different. And I went to Ken Spears of Ruby Spears. I actually went back to both Joe Ruby and Ken Spears. But Ken was the one who kind of warmed to me. And he said, well, I'll tell you what do you want to do? And this time I said, I want to be an editor. I want to be a film editor, because I knew that I could edit and I wanted a steady job.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to get in. So Ken fixed me up with a meeting with the head of his department, who, by the way, hated me. But while I was waiting to go in for the interview, there was a fellow outside in the hallway that I struck up a conversation with. And his name was Richard Allen, and he was a very nice guy. And his wife was from the East Coast as well. She was from the New England area, so we had something in common. And we were just jabbering. Then I went in and I had the interview with a guy named Dave Spence, and he hated me. And I came home and I thought, well, I didn't get that job. And then I got a phone call from Richard, who said, I'm going to be taking over the department, and I want you to work for me. So I didn't realize it, but that casual conversation I had in the corridor outside waiting for the formal interview, that actually was my interview.
Wow.
And Richard brought me into the editorial department of Ruby Spears. And that's really where my career in animation begins. I became an editor at Ruby Spears. I got into the union, and I started earning a good salary. And then eventually I did 2 seasons at Ruby Spears, and we were working on cartoons like some of them really forgotten, like Mighty Man and Yuck and Plastic Man and
I might
Rickety
remember.
Rocket.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember. Well, I must be dating myself because I remember them. So.
Well, Rickety Rocket was great because it was the first cartoon I think that had a mostly all black cast, voice cast,
Yeah,
and it was great to work with those people. And I remember Johnny Brown was one. If you remember Johnny Brown, he was
yeah,
one of the voiceover people. So I really enjoyed. That was the beginning of my education in how cartoons were made here in Southern California that ended up on network television. Because the film that I literally had in my hand 2 weeks later was airing on network TV.
wow, wow,
And that was a big deal. Network TV, as you know, was a huge deal back in
yeah,
those days.
yeah,
So that was kind of the beginning. And then at some point they laid us off at Ruby Spears, and I matriculated over to Hanna-Barbera, and I was working in the editorial department there for a couple of seasons. And then another whole adventure led me to actually becoming a writer.
wow, wow. Like I said, you jumped around and done a lot of different things in your career. Is there? I mean, one kind of discipline that you like more than the other? I know you said you like really kind of being in control of the story, but
Mhm.
do you kind of lean more towards, writing and producing, or do you like directing, editing? I mean, which
Well,
which kind of discipline do you kind of really lean towards and really like?
I am primarily a writer, and I wanted to get to the point where I could control the story. And at that point in the history of TV animation, the writer was in total control of the
Yeah,
story.
yeah,
So once I got into writing, I worked my way through editing, and I went off and did some live action editing. But then I started freelance writing.
yeah,
And once I got into writing, that was it. That was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in control of the story. And then the goal after that was to be a showrunner. So you would hopefully write and develop. I eventually got hired on staff at Hanna-Barbera, and I was writing with my partner, Cynthia Friedloeb. And we rose up the ranks. And then we got to the point where we were under consideration as story editors and showrunners. That's what they call head writers in
yeah,
animation. They call them story editors. So that actually happened. My first opportunity to be a showrunner with Cynthia happened at a company called Marvel Productions. Margaret Lesh, who was the head of Hanna-Barbera when I got hired on and became a writer, took us with her when she went over to head up Marvel Productions.
mm,
And when I came over there, that's when I was given my first opportunity to be a showrunner. I did a show for mostly everything Marvel Productions did was for Hasbro. So it
yeah,
was stuff like GI Joe and My
yeah,
Little Pony and Transformers. And I got a show called The Moondreamers, which was based on a toy line. I still have all the toys in my living room. It was based on a toy line that Hasbro was really excited about, and I got to run that show. And then shortly thereafter, I was offered the opportunity to develop for television the Fraggle Rock animated
yeah,
show, which brought me into direct contact with Jim Henson. And that was a nice, fruitful association for me.
yeah,
Because after I did Fraggle Rock, I then, you know, over the years worked for. I had a contract with NBC Productions, and I did shows for them, and that all spun off of having done Fraggle Rock for NBC. So
yeah, yeah. Jim Henson, loved Jim Henson. So ahead of his time, for sure.
yeah,
Everybody just joining us. Appreciate you, Mr. Guerin. Appreciate you, my man, tuning in for sure. My guy, Mr. Gabe, Leo. What's going on, my man? Appreciate you tuning in. We're having a great conversation with my friend John Semper Jr. Just so much work, and like I said, such a depth of experience that just, like I said, it's hard to fathom sometimes. I mean, when you got into especially into the writing portion, did you see a lot of, I mean, were there a lot of blacks or people of color in that space? I mean, what
No.
were your thoughts kind of coming in?
Well, I've always been a big advocate of finding a back door and getting in. So I had done that on many occasions already. So getting into animation writing was just a continuation of what I'd always sort of done, which was to figure out a way and figure out where I wanted to be, and then figure out a way. And I did not. It never really occurred to me that I was becoming, probably the first black writer for network animation.
Yeah.
It really just happened. All I was trying to do was get in, and then I got in. There were very few black people in animation at that time. Um, one day I went over to, somebody gave me a tour of the building where all the artists were, and I briefly was introduced to Floyd Norman. So I met him circa 1980, 81. Another young man who was just sort of getting his start doing animated sequences for various cartoons was a guy named Ron Myrick.
Mm.
And when I was working in editorial, occasionally there was a producer named Oscar Dufault, and he would hire Ron to do sequences. And so occasionally Ron would come in to look at the finished cartoon, and I'd be sitting there next to my moviola, and that's how I met Ron. But that was it. I do understand that my good friend Larry Houston at that time was working at Filmation,
Yeah.
as a storyboard artist, I assume. So there really weren't many, and there were none writing,
Wow.
because when you were writing, and certainly when you were show running, that was a huge responsibility, and they were not in the habit of giving us
Doing it.
huge
Yeah.
responsibilities.
Yeah.
So I actually became the first showrunner of color for an animated series with Moondreamers, and then I became the first showrunner, the first black showrunner for a network animated series, which was Fraggle Rock. And then I did a series, I guess it was after Fraggle Rock, which was Kid and Play. I did that for NBC, yeah, so that was definitely after Fraggle Rock. I did the Kid and Play cartoon show,
Yeah.
which was the first full black voice cast, if I'm not mistaken, for a network animated show. I don't think Rickety Rocket had been a complete black cast, but my show was, and I had Cree Summer, I had Brian Stokes Mitchell, who later became the toast of Broadway. I had Martin Lawrence, and we all know what happened to Martin.
Yeah.
And I had Tommy Davidson. I mean, and Don Lewis,
Yeah.
who I think is currently on Broadway.
Yeah.
So I had a fantastic cast on that show, and it was a fun show to do. And then, of course, I met Kid and Play, and then later ended up developing their movie Class Act for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Mr. Gate loves your background. As you can see, he's a Spider-Man guy. He's
It's all
working.
real.
It's all real
Those
toys.
are
Those
all
aren't.
real
It's not
toys.
a background. Those are real toys. So you can
These are
see.
real toys.
Oh man, let me get the full screen there so everybody can get the full scope of
Oh,
all this stuff.
these
Yeah.
are these are my acquisitions from my series.
Love it, love it, love it. Let's get to some more there. Yeah, Miss Yasmin. Yep, she loved Fraggle. I was a Fraggle. I love Fraggle Rock too. Like I
Me
said,
too.
it was such a great show, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, and as you can see by his cup, he's a Spider-Man person. He
My
loves
Spider
Spider-Man.
Cup.
As you can see, appreciate that, my man Gabe. I constantly work on making the best show I can. Hey, I'm looking to get on your show. Soon. You just I'm not up to that level yet. You haven't asked me, so but I appreciate that for sure. Yes, Fraggle Rock was awesome for sure. Miss Yasmin, animation writing. We think about animation as it relates to drawing, but never write. And that's what I think. And that's what I think a lot of people don't get. There's so many different positions, jobs, and things that you can do. Like you said, showrunner, producer, writer. It's just so many positions in that space.
Well,
that people
let me
get caught up in just animating, and
yeah,
drawing.
let me speak to that because in the 1980s and actually even before, probably going back to the 1960s, Bill Hanna decided that first of all, Bill Hanna was all about the money. It was all about producing something for the least amount of money possible, producing something of quality,
Yeah,
but for the least amount of money possible. And prior to Hanna and his TV system, there were what were called story men, and story men were artists, and they would draw, individual storyboard frames that would be pasted up on walls, and that was the script for the movie. So when you see these guys planning out Sleeping Beauty or Pinocchio or Bambi or any of these things, the story men are pinning pictures to the wall. Well, when you get into TV production, you had to make so many changes to the story because of network notes and whatever.
yeah,
That became very cost ineffective to hire artists to draw and then redraw and then redraw. So what Hanna did was he said, well, let's train writers to think visually, but they don't have to draw. What they do is they describe it on paper and they write scripts. So our scripts were similar to TV and movie scripts, but then very different in that we had to pre-visualize everything and we had to think visually. And then the storyboard artists, they were told, do exactly what's in the script, don't change anything. This is where the animosity between screenwriters and storyboard artists started, because in an artistic drawn medium, these guys are basically being told, don't do any thinking, just do what's on the paper.
yeah,
And meanwhile, though, as writers, we all became very good at pre-visualizing and understanding the needs of the cartoon. So yeah, I mean, I'm a writer. I don't draw
yeah,
anymore, and I don't do storyboards. I write, and now it's different. Now you take the script and you don't break everything down. You just write the script and you hand it to a storyboard artist, and they break it down, and now they get credit for having contributed to the story and all of that. Which, from a writing perspective, the cool thing is that you don't have to write. It's not as hard.
yeah.
Our scripts, a script for a 22-minute Smurfs probably ran sometimes as much as 45 pages.
Wow.
And a script for an 11-minute short might have run, on the average, really actually ran about 22 pages. It was
Yeah,
about 2 pages per minute when you had to break everything down. And now you can hand in a 15-page script, or even a 12-page script for a 22-minute show, which to me seems ridiculously easy. But that's the way it is. But no, everything starts with a script. Everything in this business starts with a script.
yeah, 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 yeah. And which is what I guess I kind of always loved about Pixar, and what made Pixar so great is they were story driven.
Yeah.
They started with the story, and everything worked out from there, for sure. Let me see. I want to throw some more comments up there. Yeah, Mr. DeMille is obviously impressed with your Spider-Man figures, for sure. That's a lot. That tells you how long he's been, in the business collecting these figurines, and I'm pretty sure they're worth a good penny. Some of
Well,
them.
this comes from having produced the show.
Yeah, yeah. That helps. That helps. Hey, those are all real toys. Yes, all real toys. Steve Ditko was awesome and loved Spider-Man as a kid. Yeah, I think who wasn't a Spider-Man fan? There was not too many that wasn't a Spider-Man fan. Mr. Kenny D, I appreciate you tuning in. I always love his descriptions. Today's conversation is so delectable, scrumptious, deliciously, edibly tasty good. He's so
Now I'm
descriptive with
hungry.
this word.
Now I'm hungry. This
You
is
got him
normally my
hungry there,
lunchtime.
Kenny D. You got him hungry. So, I mean, you've worked at some of the, like I said, original, just the legends in the industry, Chuck Jones, Hanna-Barbera, some of the old school ones. What
Yeah.
was um, some of the big takeaway things that you kind of learned during that period there?
Well, I worked with all my heroes. I mean, I worked with Stan Lee, and Stan was a hero of mine. I knew Stan first before I did Spider-Man. I
Yeah,
had known Stan for 10 years. Um, I worked with Stan. I worked with Jim Henson. Henson had been a big hero of mine. I worked with briefly with George Lucas, and that was a tremendous amount of fun. Um, the takeaway is that genuinely creative people pretty much let other creative people alone and let them do their thing. So they exercise taste by selecting you to do the job, and then they leave you alone.
yeah,
People that aren't creative, like many of the network people that I ended up working for, um, tend to want to micromanage everything because they're insecure. They don't know what they're doing. And so I did a job recently actually, where I was working for a couple of people who really didn't understand the business and didn't understand developing a show for kids or anything.
yeah,
And they ended up being very unhappy because they didn't get what I was doing. They didn't trust me,
yeah,
and then they wanted to micromanage me, and a lot of their choices, once they saw them realized, were not very good.
yeah,
And so, and then of course it's all the writer's fault. But the truly great people. I mean, Jim Henson was wonderful. You know, Cynthia and I went to have a meeting with him once, and we said, "So, you know, Jim, what do you want?" And he liked us very much. And we said, "So, what do you have in mind?" And he said, "Well, you know those pictures of he said, you know those pictures of dogs playing poker and sitting around a table?" And we said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, we've seen those pictures." He said, "Yeah, I want to do something like that." And we said, "Well, so anything else?" And he said, "No, just go do your thing, you know." And that's the coolest thing ever, is when somebody just lets you do your
yeah,
thing, because
yeah,
then then you're inspired, you start having ideas, you don't second guess yourself, and you want to do your best work for the person who obviously trusted you
yeah,
enough
yeah,
to give you the gig,
yeah.
and yeah, and that became Dog City.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's every creative's dream is to have that kind of freedom and trust that, the employer or whoever's hiring them gives them to create and just be creative for sure.
Yeah.
Mr. DeMille loves your impression for sure.
Yeah, technically that was a Jim impression, not a
Jim,
Kermit impression.
he sounded like, that's how Jim sounded.
There,
So yeah.
there wasn't much difference, quite frankly. They were very close. And I should point out that he ended up winning an Emmy for Dog City.
Oh
Uh,
wow,
yeah, he
awesome.
won a primetime Emmy for it.
Awesome. Well, and again, like I said, you come from kind of an early era, and you're still in the industry. What has been? I mean, obviously the technologies changed through the time,
Yeah,
and I know that was kind of a big fear when digital and computers really started coming into the mix of animation, that traditional animation artists were like, well, it was kind of this button of heads of,
yeah.
learning to technology, or are we getting pushed out of our job, that type of thing. For
Yeah.
you, was it a big kind of leap transition, or was it kind of smooth for you, kind of coming from that early stage into more digital, what we're doing today?
No change whatsoever, because a story is a story is a story. I did one of the first CGI animated series, which was JJ the Jet Plane. And we actually, JJ was kind of like a digital puppet show, because the characters were manipulated physically, and then the animation represented the manipulation that was done, sort of physically, mechanically, with puppeteers operating little devices. Lip sync came from actors saying their lines, and trackers figuring out their mouth movements and
Yeah.
everything. It was really sophisticated. There's a company called Modern Cartoons that did the work. Um, and it was really interesting, for me. I mean, I had always dabbled in computer animation, quite frankly. I still do. And I had gone to SIGGRAPH every year and followed the industry. So for me, it was something I was waiting for. I remember years ago, there was once a network person, and I was explaining to her how digital was going to change the world
Yeah.
of film and television. And I said, you're not, say you want to have an actor at a table, you're going to be able to shoot the actor green screen, and then you're going to be able to use digital to put a table in there. And she looked at me in all seriousness and said, well, why wouldn't you just get a table? And that's the kind of limited thinking. Anyway, I was really ready for digital to come in
Yeah.
because I could see the possibility, and I already kind of saw where the software was going. So for me, it wasn't any change at all. It still isn't. The cool thing about now, just in terms of what's changed, is that from a writing perspective, now there is R-rated animation, there's serious dramatic animation. I just finished writing Green Lantern Beware My Power
Yeah.
for Warner's DC. It looked spectacular on the big screen. I was really thrilled the way it came out. But we can write swear words, we
Yeah.
can kill characters. There are moments when I kind of had to touch myself, and pinch myself to see if I wasn't dreaming, because we have so much more freedom now when it comes to writing these kinds of stories, and that's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, I think now, like I said, people, are kind of, while they still enjoy, Disney and, Sony and kind of the older, they're more wanting, I guess, more cerebral type of animation, which I guess is why anime, is so big now, because it's a lot more cerebral than the children's style animations that we grew up on.
Yeah.
And they're wanting more, sophisticated, more relevant stories. And I mean, now is such a great time, I think, for, like I said, not only creators but writers that get to really dive into stories and topics that were normally more taboo at when you started out.
Well, the thing is that because I was involved with the Japanese film way back in the 70s, when Japanese animators started doing the kind of thing that we think of today as anime, these kinds of serious science fiction and violence. I mean, all the stuff that we only have just started doing in the last 10 years, they were doing back in the late 60s
Yeah.
and early and through the 70s. So my first exposure to anime was in the late 70s and early 80s, when for the same producer that I did the Japanese film series that I worked on with, the Japanese film series, the same guy that brought me out here to work on that animation a project for the investment counseling firm. He had a project that he was doing with a company called Tokyo Movie Shinsha called Cobra. It's a very famous property in Japan,
Yeah.
space adventure Cobra. And he wanted to dub the pilot for Cobra into English. So I actually did that. I wrote that. I wrote the dub, and I supervised the recording session. And then I actually edited, because I was an editor, I actually edited the final track
Oh wow.
uh, in a garage, in a cold garage in Hollywood. We rented this movieola, and I edited the final track. And I'm proud to say that pilot is actually on a Space Adventure Cobra DVD that they released. No credits, so no one has any idea that I had anything to do with it.
Yeah.
But I basically did that pilot. So I was already exposed to anime, I'm going to say circa 1979, 1980.
Yeah.
And then years later, I got to do the English language scripts for Miyazaki's
Miyazaki.
Laputa, which
Yeah.
is one of my favorite movies. Castle in the Sky, and Kiki's Delivery Service, which is one of my other favorite movies. So I've been watching Japanese film, and the way I got that job was Disney got the rights to do those projects, and they were looking for someone to do the English language scripts. And I walked in with my arm full of Japanese laser discs of all these movies that they had just acquired. And I said, no, I've been watching these movies in Japanese for years. So I think I should be the guy to do this. And that's how I got the job.
Awesome, awesome. We've got some more. Let me scale this down here a little. Comments. I appreciate, as always, people tuning in for sure. Great conversation. I'm glad you like it. Really appreciate John's wealth of experience. Yeah, I mean, like I said, 37 years, that's a lot of experience. Being in the industry as long as John has and working with some of the biggest in the industry has the animation industry changed. Yeah, obviously it's a change. If so, how has it changed? And I think he kind of touched on it a little with just how, like I said, it's, they're not doing it on the traditional as
Mm,
much. Like I said, drawing, circular drawing board. It's funny
mm.
because I was just watching, oh man, his name escapes me, but he did Brother Bear for Disney. Uh,
Not Phil
Jeez.
Mendez.
No, oh man.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that show.
Ah, jeez.
Well, while you're thinking about it, I'll
Yeah,
talk about how I think it has changed. There's like a ton of animation now. And when I got into the industry, there was not a whole lot of animation. And there are a ton of companies and there are a ton of outlets. And so there is just a tsunami of animation. Did you remember the name?
Aaron Blaze. That's
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Aaron Blaze. And he
Yeah.
was talking about because he was going to do a kind of like a workshop on traditional flipping of the pages style drawing, and it was saying how it was starting to become a lost art in just doing animation. So
Yeah. Well, now you can draw a character in 2D, but then you can rig it and have it move around, and have the computer do all your in betweens. And if you're an artist, you can onion skin, you can
yeah,
digitally onion skin. You don't have to have the drawing table with the light underneath anymore. So technically, for artists, it's changed radically. For me, from a storytelling point of view, it hasn't changed that
yeah,
much. Writing my most recent thing, Green Lantern: Beware My Power, was pretty much the same as writing Spider-Man the animated series. In fact, I was working with the same guys that I had, that had worked with me on Spider-Man.
yeah,
And so it was pretty much the same process. I am a storyteller, I am a writer, and that process doesn't change that much. But the big difference is there is now a ton of animation. For years, I would say, why aren't we doing dramatic animation? Why is everything being the Minions?
yeah,
And why is everything being funny animals? Why aren't we doing drama?
yeah.
And then now the big winner of a lot of Emmys so far this year was there's, oh God, what's the name of the animated series based on a video game world? I can't think of the name of it,
Oh,
but it's on Netflix, and it has won already several Emmys, and it's a drama. It's
yeah,
an action adventure drama, and I think that's the next big wave, is the realization that you don't have to have a funny animal, you don't have
yeah,
to have you don't have to have music.
yeah, yeah,
And again, we're following the Japanese, because the Japanese in CGI have been doing this now for a while. They've taken characters like Lupin the Third and they've done them CGI. And they've taken Captain Harlock. There was a Captain Harlock CGI movie about 8 or 9 years ago that
yeah,
was pretty cool, and done in 3D and everything. So I think that now that's the most exciting thing going on in animation, is the understanding that it can be more dramatic, and that's the biggest change.
yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree. Demille says
Thank
Arcane.
you.
Yeah,
Arcane, that's the
yeah.
name of it. Thank you.
Such a beautifully done. And anybody who hasn't seen Arcane, you definitely need to check it out because just the style of the animation, of course, along with the story of it, is just amazing. And I think, to your point, people are starting to want a lot of different types of animation. Like I said, it's not just the musical, the Disney musical, or the funny little animal sidekick that goes along with it. I mean, it's not just a kids medium anymore, or I don't think it ever was, but you know, people are, like I said, wanting more relevant and more everyday stories and everyday animations, and so there's just so much that you as a writer can bring out, in different perspectives,
Yeah.
and not just in animation, in comics, and just so many different genres now, for sure.
The great thing about animation is, when I started to discover film, and there was all this talk about auteurs and total filmmakers and all this kind of stuff. In animation, it's the only medium, it's the only cinematic medium where you control every aspect of the frame, literally, because each frame is synthesized from nothing. So if you want to talk about the total cinematic experience, really animation is right at the top of the list. You start from nothing. You control every aspect of the frame. A lot of times in live action, they shoot things because they have no choice.
Yeah.
The light is a certain way, or the camera was a certain way, or they were behind budget, and so a lot of what you get in the frame is not necessarily under 100% control. In animation, it's 100% controlled.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it really is the total film form. And the Japanese figured this out long before we did. I was blown away. My first really great anime experience was seeing Miyazaki's Castle Cagliostro on a big screen in
Yeah.
a movie theater.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's not a great animated film. That's a great film.
Yeah.
That's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And then, of course, now people know him as an Academy Award winning director. But for me, Castle Cagliostro just blew me away. It showed me the full impact of what the animated medium was capable of.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I tell you what did it for me was, and you kind of come from that era, Schoolhouse Rock.
Mm-hmm.
That really solidified for me the power of what animation can really do, in just giving out information, teaching, really an impact much more, broader and wider than just entertaining.
Yep. I was at the late Bob Duro's last live performance of Schoolhouse Rock songs. He wrote them all.
Yeah.
And I was at his last performance. I have a lovely picture of the two of us together. I think Schoolhouse Rock is wonderful.
Oh, amazing! I don't think there's too many people out there that don't know how a bill comes into being.
That was sung by jazz great Jack Sheldon, and I actually went to one of his last performances before he passed away. Jack
Oh,
Sheldon sang that, and I mean, there was such wonderful jazz talent in Schoolhouse
yeah,
Rock.
yeah. My favorite was still, a Verb. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that was one of the few ones that had a black character in it. So
Ah, okay.
yeah, I love the Verb. So that was all. But then Conjunction Junction. I
Conjunction
mean,
Junction. Yeah,
all of
right.
that stuff was just. I loved it. I just love Saturday cartoons. They're
Yeah.
just not like they were, back when I was growing up. I'm curious because you did kind of come from that kind of era. I know now, looking back on a lot of the animations, and a lot of the studios did have to kind of pull their animations and kind of really think about, some of the content that they were putting out were kind of racist in some sense. Even though I love, like I said, I wasn't a big Disney fan. I was more a Warner Brothers, Chuck Jones style. I loved his slapstick kind of style.
Hmm.
I mean, at the time, was that something that was conscious with you, or that, man, this doesn't quite, I mean, it seemed kind of, was it to you, Was it racist or inappropriate, or at the time while you were doing it? Looking back on it now.
Well, you're talking about my cartoon era
Well,
or
I
the
mean,
stuff that I
at
was
that
watching as
time,
a young
just
person?
not specifically yours, but just
Hmm.
say like I said, Bugs Bunny. You could go through
Hmm.
some of the Bugs Bunny episodes, and you could
Yeah,
clearly see that they were kind of racist at the time. But
yeah.
and I'm not specifically talking about one studio or other because they were all kind of thing. But at the time, being a black person in the industry, was that something that you were kind of conscious of, as or at least was on your mind
Well,
while you were
yeah,
going through it?
it had to be. I'm like Chris Rock. Chris Rock does a whole routine about how he's always looking for the prejudice. Even to this day, I mean, I'm looking for the prejudice, and so, I have a very sensitive prejudice meter, um, where, I mean, you don't have to live with me. You don't have to hear my tirades on a daily basis about the stuff that I can't stand that goes on in this day and age. Even some of the
Yeah,
stuff, and you think, what are these people thinking? I was watching. I'm going to go into a little bit of a rant. I was watching this thing called The Irregulars on Netflix,
yeah,
and every black person in The Irregulars is horrible, horrendous. And I'm sure that when they cast this, they went, "Hey, we're casting diversity. We've got a lot of people of color in this. Yeah, great, but every one of them is a horrible human being,
yeah,
to the point where, the big villain at the end, who's the worst of them, is a black guy."
yeah,
So, I'm no, my yes, I was very cognizant of it. When I got Spider-Man, one of my mandates, so now I got Spider-Man, I started it probably in 93. And, that was not a particularly, what people today would call woke
yeah,
time. I hate that word, but, I'll use it here. That was not a particularly woke time in animation. Nobody was looking for diversity in animation, but I was determined to put it in. Now, part of that was remembering how Stan did that in the comic books that I read in the '60s when I was
yeah,
young.
yeah,
So I thought, well, I'm gonna do what Stan did. I'm gonna make sure that Robbie Robertson is a significant part of the cast. He's not just gonna come in and go, "Hey, Jonah, look what Spider-Man's doing now."
yeah,
He was gonna We were gonna have real stories. He was gonna have real depth. I created a bunch of characters. I created a police detective named Terry Lee. I created, I gave Blade a mother, played by Nichelle Nichols.
yeah,
So I really amped up the people of color, and not just black characters, Hispanic
yeah,
characters, Asian characters. Um, uh, so that was a personal mandate of mine, that I wanted to make sure that there was a lot of representation. It was very unusual for 1993. It was so unusual that we got nominated for an NAACP Image Award,
yeah,
which was totally unexpected. I mean, I never could have predicted that. But they were obviously watching, and they said, "Well, wait a minute, there are a lot of people of color in this show, and how did
yeah,
that happen?" Well, it happened because I made it happen.
yeah,
Um, we were the first ones to really animate Blade, well before he was a movie character. So, you know, yes, the short answer is yes, and I never give short answers. I should have warned you in advance.
Hey, that's what makes a great episode for sure. For everybody that's just tuning in, we're having a fun conversation with my new friend John Semper Jr., legend in the industry of animation and film. Um, I'm curious what your thought was, because I know what my thought, was when, George Floyd's murder, happened, and then all of a sudden you saw this swell of studios, kind of throwing in their hat of we're behind Black Lives Matter and diversity and this and that.
Yeah.
Um, Feeling like it was almost a PR kind of thing, getting ahead of some kind of thing. What was your thought, you know, kind of moving through that period? And do you feel like it's getting better in a sense, or that studios are doing better? I mean, I like to say they still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
But do you feel like studios are honest. I'm kind of like you. I kind of see the the racism, and from that point of view of like, okay, are your intentions? I mean, I know as a studio, your bottom line is dollars, but are you honestly really making an effort not only at the lower levels of creators but in the executive levels of making these changes that will really bear fruit?
Mm. Um, it's definitely better. It can definitely get better. When I first got into this industry, the rule of thumb, the industry rule of thumb, was that you could not do shows with black leads because you couldn't sell them overseas.
Yeah.
So they would verbalize this. This was not like a hidden secret. This was like, well, we can't do shows with black leads because we can't sell them overseas, and that was a rule. Now, when I did Kid and Play, the head of NBC at that time, NBC was the number one network, and the head of NBC was a black woman by the name of Phyllis Tucker Vinson. And Phyllis made it a mandate that there were going to be people of color on her network, which
Yeah.
was the number one network for kids.
Yeah.
So she had the clout and she got behind that. She put her money where her mouth was. And so when she went and developed Kid and Play, that was pretty radical because that was the era when you couldn't sell, a show with black characters
Yeah.
overseas. And you have to understand, animation companies made all their money overseas, made all
Yeah.
their money in overseas and syndication. So, yeah, there was the Cosby Show, but Cosby was very much, the Fat Albert and the
Yeah.
Cosby
Fat
Show,
Albert. Yeah.
but he was very much a crossover artist, and that cast, you know, um, that show was not specifically a black show. My show, Kid and Play, really was.
Yeah.
And that was the whole thing. It was sort of spinning off from House Party.
Yeah.
So back in those days, it was impossible to have shows with a lot of characters of color, or it wasn't impossible, but it wasn't easy. Today, I think it's easier. Certainly, they're more open to showrunners of color, writers of color. I mean, today there's so much activity going on that everyone, it seems like, is working.
Yeah.
Everyone's doing something.
Yeah.
But it can always be better. I'm going to share with you my own personal gripe about all of this. Okay, there was a period of time in pop culture history of this country where it was the pulp era, the era of pulp heroes. And these were heroes that were larger than life. They were perfect. They were ideal. And they were always white. And so if you're talking about Doc Savage or Tarzan or The Shadow or any of these precursors of Superman, Batman, all the characters that would later end up in comic books, the inspiration were all of these idealized white males, primarily males, who were, sort of instilled in the pop culture of our collective, instilled in our collective consciousness through pop culture.
Yeah.
And black heroes have never had that idealized moment. We've never had, the character that is the ideal, the character that you can really look up to. I can't say we've never, but we've rarely.
Yeah.
So a Black Panther comes around and everybody makes a big deal, and that's great. I want 20 Black Panthers
Yeah.
to make up for the era that we didn't have that. I'm still, when I look at a show like Jack Reacher, who to me is the modern day personification of that pulp male ideal.
Yeah.
It's another tall, square-jawed white guy.
Yeah.
Where's the black Jack Reacher?
Yeah.
That's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for the guy who can do no wrong, who can walk through a situation and overpower it and dominate it. We got it for a minute in the blaxploitation era, although that was kind of cheesy. But
Yeah.
that's the thing I want to see. I want to see real black heroes. So you can do diverse casting and make the black woman the villain in the
Yeah.
new Star Wars thing.
Yeah.
Great. Where's the other
Black
side of
hero.
that?
Yeah. Yeah. Where's the black hero? Um,
Yeah.
and to that point, um, do you think now um, that it's it's going to take the independent creator, the independent studios, because like you were saying, um, that was kind of the whole reason that spawned Milestone. Comics. They didn't see black superheroes. In the world. So do you feel like it's going to take those independent creators that are creating their own, you know, characters and stories and heroes that's really going to push and make this change? I mean, studios are doing this, they're doing their thing, but now, especially in this time where we have so much social media, you can get your ideas and your stories out there in so many
Mhm.
platforms and ways that the creator can bypass and go directly to the audience to get their stuff out there. Do you feel it's going to take that kind of push?
Yes. I think that's one of the big differences. One of the great differences of what's going on right now is that you can find your audience without the gatekeepers, without having to deal with the gatekeepers, and you can get your ideas out there. Um, Whether or not the big studios are going to put huge amounts of money on a regular basis behind major motion pictures or major comic book, distributors,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, there's still a kind of an institutionalized racism that you run up against, but definitely independent creators getting stuff out there. I worked with Dennis Cowan and
Yeah.
Dwayne McDuffie when I did Static Shock,
Yeah.
and that was a milestone show. That was
Yeah.
in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
That was a wonderful situation that they created, and they did that independently, and that maybe is the way that it has to start. I think also hiring more creators of color.
Yeah.
I think that there have been wonderful strides made in that direction. You've got people like Shonda Rhimes, who's doing amazing work,
Yeah.
and Ava DuVernay, who's doing
Yeah.
amazing work. And so more of that,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, and I personally will continue my quest to create great heroes of color who are not as flawed as they sometimes always end up being when heroes of color are created. I really want to create some idealized characters that young kids can look up to.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. For sure. Mr. DeMille, need more of Luke Cage and Miles Morales as well, for sure. I don't know if they've really done justice to Luke Cage yet. I was a big Luke Cage fan, comic book fan. Like I said, I
Yeah.
wasn't of the TV series they did or the show Netflix thing they did, but
Yeah.
I think if they, of course, they knocked it out of the park with Miles Morales and Spider Man. Um, and it's funny, and I'm going to ask you this as well too, because I've been kind of reading about this a lot lately, where a lot of studios are getting kind of pushback from those. Specifically, I've been reading about like Star Wars. They're getting all this flack from fans saying, "Well, why are you making it diverse when that kind of thing?" You know, bringing in diverse characters. Um, your thought on kind of how like some are kind of switching it up, like, or trying to make like a woman Thor, or or a black Superman. It's kind of,
Mm.
I get Spider Man because he's just a kid behind a mask, or a kid behind a mask, and I get Batman, because he's human, he's going to age, so somebody else is going to take up the mantle of that, and you could put a person of color to do that. But your thoughts on just totally redesigning, or just for the sake of you know um, what's the word? For the sake of uh, political correctness. That's the word I was
Hmm.
trying to find. Political correctness, changing, these established characters as opposed to going out and getting characters that were created, such as milestone characters and things like that.
Yeah, I think that I understand the intent. I think it's well-meaning in a kind of a ham-fisted way, but really, the idea of a Black Thor is ludicrous. Um, it just feels very forced. I think that's one of the reasons why there is such a fan backlash against it. I personally don't want to see a black Superman. I think the idea is ridiculous. Um, what I want to see is a brand new character that um, that everybody gets excited about,
Yeah.
that does not have a white precedent, that really demonstrates depth and sensitivity and nuance, that is an original black character. You take someone like Morpheus in the what's the series,
Matrix.
the Matrix. Thank you.
Matrix. Yeah.
That's an original character, and that character was really very impactful, at least initially in the
Yeah.
first movie. And or the Oracle. I mean, give us more Morpheus original characters. I'm not that interested in seeing a black Superman. I think that's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's sort of bargain rate.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel right. So
Well,
that's a
and on
personal.
that point, because you have such a storied history with Spider-Man, what was
Mhm.
your thought when Miles Morales came around?
Well, the idea of Miles Morales, I thought, was a pretty good one. I think that Bendis really is a very clever, inventive guy, and he did it right. Um, See, it's a little interesting, my whole relationship with that movie, because I'm the one who created the Spider Verse. I love to say that because I know it infuriates a lot of people out there. But you watch the first two episodes of my Spider-Man series, and there's the Spider Verse. I
Yeah.
created it. So the fact that they borrowed the idea, no doubt an homage to my greatness, uh,
No doubt.
no doubt. The fact that they borrowed the idea and used it for that movie, on one hand, I'm sort of honored because obviously it was a good enough idea to make a multi-million-dollar movie that won an Academy Award.
Yeah.
It's a great movie. I love the movie. I think they did a wonderful job. And I'm not saying that that movie is something that I could have done. I think the film is brilliant. But the idea, the Spider-Verse idea, I created, period. So the idea of there being multiple dimension Spider-Man, I can't blast it because it was my idea.
Yeah.
And so, can there be a black Spider-Man in that context? Yeah, I suppose there can be. That works. But again, my preference would be create a brand new character from
Yeah.
scratch. And it always sort of bothered me that I'm sorry, that Luke Skywalker wasn't black
Mm.
just from the get-go.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that have been great? Wouldn't it have been great if the biggest movie
Yeah.
of our generation had had a black Luke Skywalker?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the kind of thing I'm looking for. I want to see the Black Harry Potter. I want there to be a brand new franchise that's brilliant and great and that the world falls all over itself. And then it just happens to have a black character because somebody thought that was a really worthwhile thing to do. Not trying to, make up for
Yeah.
something, by forcing there to be a black Thor or a black
Yeah.
Superman. Create an original character, make it brilliant. I mean, that's actually, I'm a creator. That's what I should be doing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
instead of me blaming Hollywood or blaming creators out there, I should be doing it. And that's actually something that's high on my list of things to do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's always kind of my pet peeve about, I guess, Hollywood. They're so used to regurgitating old characters, old stories, and not
Yeah.
coming up with very little original. I don't know if it's like I said, their goal obviously is dollars, so they're not sure whether or not something new is really gonna make money. So that's why they're less averse to going out on a limb to getting new characters and things like that. Um, for you, um, like I said, you know, as always, you've been in the industry a while. What what are some of the animations today that you alluded to Arcane? What are some of the animations today that you look at and you're like, that's really impressive. I really like the story. I really like the animation. The
Yeah.
whole thing was just top notch.
Yeah. There's a show called Unreal that I thought was brilliant the first season. Um, I got to tell you, I don't watch a lot of animation because
Yeah.
a lot of it pisses me off.
In what sense?
Well, there's a certain design sensibility that's out there now that I don't like. The sort of gigantic eyed,
Oh yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know. And then some of it is that I've just seen a lot of TV cartoons, and so the, the the medium doesn't hold a lot of interest for me unless something really radically interesting is being done.
Yeah.
And then the other one is that I sit in front of the TV and I go, well, now why didn't they hire me?
I could have done better than that.
Which is every writer on the planet. Every writer on the planet sits there and goes, why didn't they hire me for that job?
Oh
Um,
man. Oh
uh,
man.
Sometimes it's just frustration. Like when they do a show like Thunderbirds,
Oh yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think, well, I could have done Thunderbirds,
Yeah.
and you can't get around that. But Unreal, I watched and I thought, wow, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Uh, and there were a couple of other things that I've watched. Mostly these days, I sort of get interested in technology
Yeah.
and what people are doing with new technologies. So virtual reality,
Yeah.
some
Well, what do
people
you?
have done.
And I'm curious because, like I said,
Yeah,
that it's really started to get big now, especially now that film studios have gotten a hold of Unreal, the game
yeah,
engine, and what the Mandalorian did with it. I'm kind of like you, just I love seeing how technology really kind of gets into the hands of creators and they use it for something just totally different.
yeah. Oh well, the technology Unreal, the game engine Unreal, which is
Yeah,
different
yeah,
from the TV show. No, I love that stuff. I
yeah,
just love it. Whenever there's a new technology, like I'm heavily into VR.
yeah,
I was heavily into computer animation before anybody was even thinking it was ever going to be viable as as an entertainment medium. Um, no, I mean I love that stuff. I love all new technologies. I'm a technology wonk. So whenever anything new comes along, if you've ever worn a VR HMD and seen some of the animations that have been done
yeah,
for VR, and you're thinking, not only do they have to think about what's happening there, but they have to think about what's happening,
yeah.
back there, and it's amazing. It's really. I took a bunch of kids to kids. They're younger than me, so they're kids. But as part of a birthday celebration, I took a bunch of people to a VR, a Star Trek VR thing, and
Man.
we were on a planet, and we beamed down, and we fought Klingons, and we
Oh man.
there were
Yeah.
the Enterprise was above us, and I thought the first HMD helmets I ever wore were at SIGGRAPH maybe in the late 90s. They cost probably around $300 or $400,000 to build,
Yeah.
and what all you saw when you moved your head were geometric shapes that had no texture, no color, nothing.
Yeah.
And for us to now have these $300 devices in our homes where you can immerse yourself in a total environment,
Yeah.
and then the thought of creating entertainment for that,
Yeah. Yeah.
how do you create these immersive, I mean, I want to work, I want to do that.
Yeah.
I want to create immersive entertainment where you're standing in the room with the performers, whether they're animated or live action, and you're literally there. I'm very excited about the prospect of that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And like I said, for me, it's it's got such a wide experience, not just entertainment but education. Like I said, now with, like you said, VR, you could
Yeah.
take a kid to another country and have them experience that country, that culture in a totally different way.
Yep.
Um, it's the potential of it. That's what excites me. The potential of it in the hands of so many great creators is just, it's mind blowing when you think about what some, creators are doing with a lot of the technology. And it's funny. I'm reminded of a quote that John Lasseter had said a long time ago. Technology pushes art, and art pushes technology. They kind of push each other to make each other better.
Yep.
And the things that you can get out of it.
Yeah, I'm something of an animation historian because I used to write articles, for Boston magazines and stuff. And the two go hand in hand. Every great animator or animation producer was also fascinated by technology. And when CGI came in and there was such a backlash amongst a lot of animation fans and historians and whatnot against CGI, and
Yeah,
I thought, you guys have got it all wrong. You look at the Fleshers, you look at Disney. I mean, Disney embraced sound technology. The Fleshers embraced rotoscoping and
yeah,
three-dimensional backgrounds that they built out of scale models and rotated on a giant turntable.
yeah,
These guys loved technology. That was part of being an animator, was trying to figure out new ways. Disney and the multiplane camera.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
if you're not ready to embrace technology and dive into it wholeheartedly, then I really question your commitment to animation in a way,
yeah, yeah.
because the two go hand in hand.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. Mr. DeMille, Oculus Quest 2 owner. Yeah, I
Yay.
still got to get me an Oculus. I totally agree. The technology has so much potential. You could really get lost in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is maybe why I don't have it, because I probably would spend hours. Just like you said, DeMille, I have spent countless hours using it. Um,
Yep.
but like I said, it's for people that haven't tried a VR headset yet, it's like I
Mm.
said, you definitely should, because it just gives you so many different experiences, not only, like I said, in entertainment, but just educational wise, of the potential of what it could do. And really put you in an immersive experience. So, what are your thoughts on, like, this new thing, the metaverse, and what's going on with that? Or have you kind of looked at, what's happening, with the metaverse?
It's happening now. I mean, it really is happening. It's inevitable. I don't have to like it or dislike it. It
Yeah,
is inevitable because the technology allows for it, and someone's going to create it one way or another. It might not be the one that Zuckerberg's creating.
yeah,
It might be one that gets created. One of the interesting things about technology is usually the first people who embrace it are pornographers. You know,
yeah,
they're the first. They're right there. When it was video online, the pornographers were there. When it was VR, now the pornographers are
yeah,
there. 3D, the pornographers are there. It might be that pornography, that X-rated stuff ends up being the first metaverse. Um, I think it's a great idea. A friend of mine who does these wonderful three-dimensional images that he puts on Facebook.
yeah,
Um, he built a gallery of all of his three-dimensional art. Um, and it's all virtual.
yeah,
And he had a couple of gallery shows that I went to. I'm sitting here in my office, and suddenly I'm interacting with people internationally, just people from all over the world, and we're all in this one gallery, and we're all looking at these beautiful 3D images that we could see in perfect 3D as we walk through the gallery. It's here.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's amazing the stuff that you can do, and it's funny because I'm trying to get her on the show as well, but I've been following her for a while now on LinkedIn. Her name is Anna. Uh, I may hack up her last name, but I'll try to get it right. Zilyeva. I think she's over in Russia, or over in that area. But she's a
Mhm.
virtual reality artist, and she does these amazing paintings in virtual reality.
Mhm.
And like I said, it's just amazing the things that come out of creativity. Like I said, when you get technology in the hands of creatives, you see such amazing things, which is why I
Yeah.
love this time.
Yeah, I'm with your commenter who just said, it's truly mind blowing. It's almost more than my head can handle. The fact that you can, what I've done is I've built, little environments and then enlarged them or made myself shrink down, and then you can walk around in this environment and you go, hey, I made that building, I made that tree, and it's there's never been anything like it. When you take a block, a virtual block, and you're sculpting it, and then you go, I think I'll make it the size of a house, and then there's a little button or a slider, and and suddenly you're holding it. It's weightless. There's no, our minds can't fully process what that's all about. So I find that I can only do it in doses because it really is so
Yeah,
uh, strange, but it's wonderful strange. It's really cool stuff.
yeah. And during your time so far in the industry, what's been the best piece of advice that you've been given? Um,
Here's, I get asked sometimes to lecture to young people, and or to advise people. Someone will call me up and say, I've got a friend who's new, she's new in town, he or she's new in town, would you talk to them? And the biggest change, I think, between the kind of person I was when I was in my 20s and the kind of person that there is today is that the kind of person today has a lot of choice. A young person today has a lot of choice. And so there is this thought that they should exercise choice. And that's a good thought. I think exercising choice is healthy.
mhm.
When I got into the industry, I didn't feel like I had a lot of choice. But conversely, because I didn't think I had a lot of choice, I did a lot of things that I might not have chosen to do that I learned lessons from, or that got me to the next step that was where I wanted to get to. And I think that a lot of young people today, sometimes because they do have a lot of choice and they do want to exercise choice, they miss out on things. I once did a panel years ago where there were a lot of young writers who were saying things like, "Well, I don't know, I don't want to write comedy. I don't want to write comedy. I don't want to write kid stuff. You know,
Yeah,
I never, it never occurred to me that I had a choice. So I learned how to write comedy. When I first started in this business, I was considered a comedy writer, and
yeah,
they weren't going to let me do any action adventure. Stan Lee brought me in to do Spider-Man, and
yeah,
he turned me into an action adventure writer. And then, oh, well, he can't write comedy, he writes action adventure, or he can't write kid stuff. No, I've done it all. And I think that sometimes if you try to exercise too much choice, if you think you have choice to exercise, you miss out on learning skills that are necessary for your long-term survival. I have written everything. I've done movies, I've done, live action, I've done animation, I've done preschool,
yeah,
I've done action adventure. I've handled all the full range of characters.
yeah,
And that's because I was scrambling.
yeah,
I never thought, well, I can't turn anything down.
yeah.
Um, should you always be that way? No, I think having choice is a good thing, but I think you should also find yourself outside of your comfort zone every now and then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Great advice for sure. And you know how I always do it. Uh, when a bomb drop like that of knowledge, I have to drop a bomb. So hopefully all of you out there caught that.
That knocked me out. I think I'm gonna have to sue you.
But no, great advice for sure. And I think, like you said, um, which while I love this time of the technology, I think it kind of can be a dual edged sword in the sense that there's so much out there, like you said, so many choices, so many things that people can do that, like I said, it doesn't put them in this I want to experience, a lot of different things. And really make me a more well-rounded person about that for sure. Um, Everybody, like I said, we are having a great conversation, and we're going into the 2 hour mark there for sure. But it's been fun. I can't say it enough. I hope all of you are getting something from this as well and enjoying it as well. Like I said, this is for me, because I'm a, like I said, cartoon comic, you know, kind of nut. I've enjoyed this tremendously, for sure. Where, I mean, like you said, you've been in this industry a while, and you're, like you said, you're still going at it. You're still going at it. What is it that, I mean, that keeps that joy of this industry for you at this point? You get a lot of people that get, oh, I got burned out, I get this, and then get that. But for you, what is it that just continues to pull you through and keep going through this industry that you love?
Well, that's a good question. You have different needs and wants and desires as you move through different ages. Um, I did burn out at one point when I was probably in my 40s. I had to take a little time away from everything because I just sort of felt like I had not paced myself correctly, and I had kind of begun to lose my momentum, just my personal momentum. So I think pacing yourself is a very important thing. At this stage of my life and my career, I really only want to be involved with people that I enjoy being with, because that wasn't always the case earlier in my career. I ended up having to work with a lot of people that I didn't enjoy working with.
Yeah.
And so now I choose projects that will have me working with people that I really like, and I choose projects that I'm personally excited by, that bring me a certain amount of delight. And I I must give a shout out to Jim Krieg over at Warner's, because he was the one who approached me. I've known Jim for years. He was one of my writers on Spider-Man. And he was one of the ones, he was actually the person who approached me and got me involved in Green Lantern, Beware My Power. It's such a kick to be my age and have this major motion picture. We had it premiere at San Diego Comic-Con, and it was, a big success. I think it sold well. It appears to have sold
Yeah.
well. So I'm really delighted about that. And more projects like that, working with Jim, working with my co-writer Ernie, whom I also worked with back in my days on Spider-Man, and working with friends that I like, people that I like. Um, there are a lot of real jerks out there, and I don't really have any great desire to deal with
Yeah.
jerks and idiots anymore. I just want to work with people who are fun and have
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things I've kind of picked up along the way about this industry is it's a relatively, small industry. Everybody kind of knows everybody and has
Yeah,
worked with everybody at one point or another. And the main thing is they don't want you to be a hole. It's nobody
yeah,
wants to work with an a hole. So, I mean, as long as you got a great personality, and obviously, from your career, just being, just being a friendly person and making friends has really served you, working and moving around to different projects. Because if just like your friend Jim Krieg that you just mentioned, you worked with him before. If you were a jerk, he wouldn't have thought enough to even call you, or that type.
well, I find that I connect better with younger people. I was actually never terribly popular with my generation of writers. They would be the ones. I'll be very candid. My generation of writers would be the ones who would be least disposed towards hiring me.
Mm.
Um, but younger people, I get along really well with younger people, and people who have got new, fresh ideas and
Yeah.
approaches to things. They seem to actually appreciate me more. So
Yeah.
I've kind of written off my whole generation of peers.
Yeah.
You know, some of them are nice people, but I never expect that they're going to be the ones that are going to hire me for anything. More often than not, I get along with young people coming in with fresh perspectives, fresh
Yeah.
ideas, and who have an appreciation for what I've done.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And wanting to see the change. That's why I was saying. That's what I, you know, was talking to somebody else about Disney. I think it's as the older guard starts to move out and the younger generation starts to come in,
yeah,
they're going to want to bring in the stories and the ideas and things that they want to see.
yeah.
And that's when the change is really going to start to happen for sure. I want to quickly show, like I said, some of John's work that he's worked on for sure. Like I said, it's definitely, um, I love it. Like I said, it's definitely something that is. Let me make. Oh, I don't want to do that. Yep, this is it. For sure. I love Spider Man. Who doesn't? Like I said, who doesn't love Spider Man?
There's
Um, for
there's
sure.
a wonderful artist whose name escapes me right at the moment who did that drawing. That's fan art. And what I love about that piece of fan art, and I'm sorry that I don't remember the artist's name because I should, but what I love about that piece of fan art is that that's my Spider Verse.
Yeah.
That is the Spider Verse that I created for my series, and that is the first Spider Verse.
Yeah.
So
Loved it. Love it. Love it. Oops. Oops. Oh, I want to move that out. We'll bring in. And Green Lantern was another favorite of mine for sure. And definitely love. This looks like it's going to be amazing. So I definitely can't wait to check this out for sure. But what was your? I mean, for you, when you sit down, to write, what's your process for? Okay, what kind of story am I gonna, try and pull out? I mean, do
whatever
you?
I'm being hired to do, whatever I'm being hired to
So
write,
they'll tell you kind of the idea of what they want the
always.
story.
The best is the kind of thing that Jim Henson did, where he said, "I want to do something like the dogs sitting at the table with the playing poker." Then you have a wide open canvas, but rarely do you get a wide open canvas. Usually, like in the case of Green Lantern, Jim had a very clear idea of what he wanted. We were going to do something like Apocalypse Now. It was going to involve these characters, and the structure was loosely going to be blah blah blah. So then Ernie and I met with Jim, and we beat out the story right there in Jim's office, and we worked it out on a whiteboard. But Jim had a very good idea. The way that I used to work on Spider-Man is the similar way. If you watch the episodes of Spider-Man, we did 65 half hours. Most of them start out saying story by John Semper,
Yeah,
and that's because I would always go to my writers and say, here's the story we're going to tell. I wanted to, here's the beginning, here's the middle, here's the end. Now let's beat it out. And then they would get involved in beating it out. And then once we had beat out the story, they would go off and write the first draft. I always had the last, I was always the last pair of hands on the script. So, I always had the last word. And then even after we got film back, because I had a superhero whose mouth didn't show, I could still rewrite his lines right up until practically air date.
mm,
That's, I think that to be a showrunner, to be a good showrunner, you have to have a very solid ability to come up with stories. Because if you're waiting for people to walk into your office and pitch stories to you and have that work, I think you're gonna have a very difficult time.
yeah,
So in Spider-Man, I always had a really strong idea of what the arc was going to be, which is why I take so much credit for that series.
yeah,
There's no other series really that I'll sit down and say, well, I did this and I did that and I did the other. But with Spider-Man, after about episode 13, it really was what I wanted the show
yeah.
to be,
To be
and
about.
that's the way I work.
Yeah, and like I
Yeah,
said, you can't help but love that kind of working environment where, like I said, you get to take ownership of
yeah,
the thing that you're working on for sure.
yeah.
Love
Yeah,
this
that's
one.
another piece of fan art that I'm very pleased to say was based on my show, very obviously influenced by my show. And those are the villains that we had on the show that somebody has done in a very three-dimensional style. And again, I don't know the artist, so you should credit the artist when you can.
Definitely.
But that's a nice piece of art,
Yeah.
and it shows the influence that my show still has even to this day.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud of that.
Love it.
And that's just a
Yeah.
piece of art, yeah, that I found that
Yeah.
someone, a really nice Spider-Man.
Cyborg. So you
That was
did
my
some.
run on Spyborg.
Yeah. So you did some time with DC and doing some writing for them. Um,
Yeah.
was that a enjoyable process for you? Time
I
there.
loved the best part for me was at one point I was writing 2 comics a month, and so every 2 weeks there would be a new comic that would come out with my name on it, and I loved that. I absolutely loved that. The process was a little constipated in that you would outline what you wanted the story to be months in advance, because they have these things called I forget what they called them, but they have to sort of pre-sell the issue to the to all the outlets.
Yeah.
So you come up with the plot that you're going to do, and then more often than not, literally a week or so before your script was due to actually be handed in, they'd say, "Oh, you can't do that because we have because Batman's doing such and such, or we're doing a thing where Suicide Squad meets the Justice League, and they're doing such and such, and so you can't do that thing that you were planning to do months ago. You now can't do, and you have to do a different thing." And fortunately, I'm quick on my feet, and I would come up with an alternative. But that drove me a little bit crazy. But I loved writing comic books for DC. It was great fun, and I had a great time working with some fun people. And yeah, it was great. 19 issues. Now I can say I've done it. Um, uh, I think probably for me, a little bit of the frustration was that right at the time that I was writing Cyborg was when Coates was doing Black Panther.
Mhm.
So all the energy was was
Right.
on that and that run, and everybody was paying attention to that. But it was kind of a double-edged sword. On one hand, I would have loved more attention on my Cyborg run. On the other hand, I was happy to just be off in my little corner doing my thing,
Do your thing and not
not
having
being bothered by all that pressure. So he can have all the pressure. I didn't have to deal with all that pressure.
Also, for sure, for sure. Got a few more here. Another cyborg edition, for
Great, great
sure.
artist. Will Conrad did that one, and I loved working with Will. And then they graduated him to doing, I think, Action Comics right after he did Cyborg, because he's so good.
Mm.
Uh, but I loved working with Will, and there was another artist, Alan Jefferson. I thoroughly enjoyed working with. In fact, we're doing right now a comic book based on Robin Hood together.
Mm.
We're that you'll get a sneak peek announcement, but that'll be announced relatively soon.
Awesome, awesome. This is JJ's Christmas surprise. One of
I
one of
love JJ. They're doing a new JJ, I hear, and they've redesigned all the characters. But I loved all these goofy, big-faced airplanes with their pudgy cheeks, and this was all CGI. This was CGI before CGI was really
a thing.
a commonplace thing.
Yeah.
So, and I wrote this one. This is actually 2 episodes joined together, and they released it as a special. But I wrote them both.
Awesome. Do you think the fact that like I said, for everybody that's just joining in, again, like I said, we've been having a fun conversation with my friend John here. But do you think the fact that you have been able to kind of jump around to different things, kids, more, those, that's what also keeps it fresh for you?
Yeah, I mean that's what keeps me alive. If I said I'm only going to do action adventure, then I would have done Spider-Man. I would have done Static Shock. Maybe Green Lantern, Beware My Power. But that's there's a 25-year gap in there. So no, I do everything. I love writing preschool. Uh, I I really love the medium of animation and telling fantasy stories and bringing them to life. So whether that's for very young kids, right now I'm working with a company that's doing very very young stuff, and I love it. It's fine, and I love working with puppets
Mm.
because we're doing a thing with puppets right now, and yeah, I love it. It's great. I'm working right now with a company called MVP Kids, and they publish books for very young kids, and most
Yeah.
of their stuff is sort of in schoolrooms. But we're branching out, and I'm helping them to develop programming for children,
Mm.
TV and movie programming.
Yeah.
So I'm having a blast. It's great fun.
Awesome, awesome. Again, like I said, we are coming up on the second hour mark here. And I'm not gonna keep my guests too long. Like I said, I'm looking forward to having them back on for sure. Because, like I said, it's just too much um, knowledge not to have a part two or part three or part four. So John's John's been in the industry too long for that, for sure.
Yeah.
Make sure, and I hope everybody, like I said, has enjoyed this because I know I have, and definitely appreciate John, you taking the time just to come on and be on the show, be a part of the
Thank
Color of Motion family, and share such wisdom. Like I said, for me, this is why I do the Color of Motion because why, like I said, I was a big fan of the Jetsons, of Hanna-Barbera, but definitely wouldn't have known that you or other people of color were a part of it because it's just not what we see and it's just not not known. So that's why I love doing this show to expose others and show them what I would have wanted to see when I got into the you know loving comics and cartoons. Just seeing that there was somebody of color doing it would have inspired me that much more. So I appreciate you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge. Again, uh, all this information is going to be in the show notes. Make sure that you connect with John because, like I said, he's such a great guy. He does such amazing work, doing such amazing work. Check out his website, johnsemper.com. Connect with him on Facebook. Connect with him on LinkedIn, like I did. Um, but uh, make sure that you get connected with him. Also, make sure you get connected into the Color of Motion because he is now in the Color of Motion family, and you just never know when he'll pop up in the group and stuff and start
you.
chatting. So definitely search him out. Like I said, all this information is going to be on the show notes on YouTube. So make sure you go over there. One, not only like and give a thumbs up to the episode, but get his information and get connected with John for sure. John, again, I want to thank you, one, for accepting, like I said, my connection request and being on. Like I said, I'm so appreciative of it for sure, and definitely look forward to having you back on. Definitely look forward to building this friendship that we've started for sure, and just can't thank you enough, man.
Well, Don, I think what you do here is really important, and I think that you're doing a great job, and I'm very happy to be on. I would love to come back. Thank you for inviting me, and I am for all your listeners. I'm on Facebook mostly,
Yeah,
so
check him out
that's
on Facebook. That's his
the greatest
home
way
there.
to connect up with me. I'm a Facebook fanatic, and I love doing shows like this that are themed toward people of color who really want to get into this business. So thank you, Don, for giving me the opportunity to do this.
Thank you. If you could hang out for just a few minutes in the green room while I close out the show,
Sure.
Mr. Jerry, I appreciate you, my man, tuning in and checking out. I hope you enjoyed the show as well. Mr. Jerry Gaylord, super talented artist. comic book artist as well. So appreciate that, Jerry. I appreciate all of the viewers that make the Color of Motion as successful as it is, and all the guests as well. Again, please, everybody, help me thank my special guest and friend, John Semper Jr. And John, again, if you could hang out for just a minute while I close out the show. But
Yep.
thank you. Everybody, it has been another amazing episode. This was a fun one because, like I said, I'm a big cartoons, comics, and animation fan. I love visual effects and I love, motion graphics and stuff. But at my core, and which is why, like I said, I wanted to be a cartoonist when I was young. That was my thing. I wanted to be a comic strip artist. So I have a great passion and love for comics, cartoons, and animation. So this was episode made in heaven for me. So I love it. I hope you enjoyed it as well. Again, this is always something that I just love doing and love bringing to you each and every week. And so, I'm thankful that, you tune in and make it such a great show for me to do. Make sure, like I said, you hop on over to the YouTube channel, get his information, get connected. More importantly, comment and give a thumbs up on these episodes because it definitely helps the channel immensely, and helps us to continue to grow for sure. Also, make sure that you tune in next week because we're going to have another special guest, Mr. Baptiste Jacumet, Effects Technical Director with Weta, another great company that does some amazing work as well. Effects Technical Director. So I'm looking forward to having him on next week as well. So you definitely don't want to miss out on that. With that, we are going to put this one in the can. This was a great episode, a fun episode for me, and can't thank you enough for being here with me as well. With that, I hope to see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Have a great week, everybody.